Hello, everybody, and welcome to the session, The Lister Moves. Not my moves, unfortunately, those of Analysta, which is far more interesting. And I'm thrilled to be joined today by Katherine Pennavaria and Anna Hawthorne to talk about how Analysta managed to seduce so many women in the early 19th century and in Halifax. Two very impressive feats. So I am Kate Lister. I am a historian of sexuality, primarily sex work, but I have obviously, being Yorkshire based, have researched Anne Lister. I mean, how can you not? She's absolutely fascinating. I'm the author of A Curious History of Sex and I love the last name. Yes, I've never done the research to find out if I am related to Anne Lister. So we'll just say I am. Yes. It's just such a lie. So I'm the host of the Betwixt the Sheets podcast. I'm a lecturer at Leeds Trinity University and author of Curious History of Sex. And I'm going to hand over now to Anna, and she's going to tell you a little bit about herself and about her research into Anne Lister.
Hello. I am doing a PhD on Analysta, and I'm doing it at Sheffield University. And I started back in 2019, so I'm actually going into kind of my fourth and final year. I was supposed to be finishing in March, but we'll see. And I'm doing it on kind of random aspects of her journals, but I've chosen to kind of narrow down how much material there is. I've just chosen 3 years of her journals, and I transcribed those because they weren't done yet by the transcription project, which was fun in itself because every day I was working away at it and I was giving all my housemates little updates on the Analysta Chronicles. And I'm doing 1819 to 1822 when she's my age, basically, because I couldn't think of all the reasons of choosing certain periods seemed quite arbitrary, so I thought I might as well try and relate more strongly by having her be around the same age. And I've been doing all sorts of random little bits. I'm going to do like a section on body and illness because the body keeps interrupting the text, but usually when it's misbehaving. I'm going to do a bit on relationships, which is what I've been working on recently, which is really difficult because there is actually a lot of material. And then I've done bits on wanking. So I did the wank paper at the Analysta conference back in April. And I'll also do some other kind of nefarious little bits. But yeah, that's me.
Thank you very much, Anna. And Katherine Pennavaria, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I am new to researching Anne Lister, and I'm really looking forward to this. My background is actually in literature. I have a graduate degree in English literature and also in library science. I'm currently a librarian and I teach English. I came at this originally just looking at the literary parallels for Anne Lister's real behavior, and I sort of got sidetracked into the actual behavior, which is what we're going to talk about today. So I don't really have any kind of published things. I do have a couple of published books, but they're on genealogy, which now, Kate, I'm thinking maybe I can help you with your, well, maybe you don't really want to know. You want to just keep saying, yeah, definitely.
I think I would still keep saying yes, even if it turned out that I wasn't related to Anne Lister.
That's the ticket. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Really looking forward to talking about the moves.
And I'm going to start there, actually. A question to both of you. So this session is called The Lister Moves. And all the great lovers in history have had their moves, their shtick. Casanova liked oysters, Byron, whatever it was he did. How did Anne Lister seduce lovers? What were her moves? How did she seduce her lovers? And we'll go to Katherine first.
Well, I think it was primarily first through language, both what she said and what she didn't say. She often got her potential lovers to speak to her in a very intimate way, but she herself was not so open with the details of her own past. So she used language both to flatter and court women. She said things to them by her own report that are a little, odd to hear one woman saying, like, telling someone that she had a pretty mouth. I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily a move that would seduce, but what I mean is she used this language to establish a sort of connection, and then got these people to say things, to tell her their secrets, and then she would kind of have that as a way in to establishing a bond with them somehow. So I think she didn't make her moves initially with her hands, basically. It was with her, words, I think.
So creating an intimacy, secrets, and being in each other's confidences. Clever. What about you, Anna? What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And I also think she knew, she talks of being gentlemanly, but softly so. So I think she understands that because she has a certain kind of intelligence and learning, that she's self-taught, she has a standing amongst other people, especially women, that is perceived by them as kind of different or other, but she combines that with a flattery or a flirtation that I think then comes across as quite marked. And I think everyone kind of has the feeling that she is not straight, but it's kind of, they wouldn't have the language per se, or they wouldn't be so direct about how you deal with that. But I think mainly they would just call her odd or freakish or eccentric, and she kind of gets away on those things. But I think that's why her moves kind of start out, I think, by setting herself apart with that intelligence, and
Yeah,
then
that makes
moving in for a flirty
the kill.
Yeah.
I'm interested as well in the language that she uses herself in the diaries, because there's a lot of question about how well known was lesbian sex at the time. How did she understand it? And presumably a lot of the language in the diaries she's making up as she goes along. One of the phrases that she uses is handling when she's making love to a woman. Is that right?
She does say that about a couple of different people. I handled her for 45 minutes or something. It's hard to imagine that would really get, a lot of cooperation. Well, maybe they didn't know that's how she was talking about them. I think she actually used the language that she used to describe her actions in the diary was not the same as the language that she would have ever acknowledged, to the individuals. She used the language that they wanted to hear. And I think with her language and then with her actual physical behavior, she almost put women in a sort of compromised position. They had revealed their secrets, they had allowed her to touch them, and then suddenly they were it's almost like they just sort of kept going down that stream. So I don't think her seduction moves are in any way sort of in a traditional sense, what we think about as somebody wooing somebody. I think she was a bit, I don't know. It's a little off-putting sometimes to read her, the way she talks about that handling.
I was handled.
Yeah.
She also just, she's just quite straightforward with how she reports a lot of stuff. And I think that comes from reading a lot of medical texts and having an interest in medicine.
That's true. Good point.
So she's very exact with what she does. And I think there is like an inconsistency or like a part of how she speaks about touching that we will never quite know the full reason behind. So for example, when she has sex, sometimes she mentions putting like her left forefinger up, or like she'll mention fingering, but other times she doesn't. And so when I first came across it, I was like, oh, this is different. Why has she put this in? Is it because it's new or different? Why is she logging this now? But then other times we'll never know if it's just that for some reason she wanted to log it that time, and other times maybe she was always doing that. But like a lot of the sex practices that we get are only via this journal, which are obviously going to be, we don't know how true they are, I guess. But there's lots of bits about just the ins and outs of what she does, and she'll say how far she gets up a thigh. She'll log whether she sat on someone's knee or they sat, well, usually they sit on her knee. She'll log if she gets boob action. She likes a bit of boob fondling and sucking boobs. She gets away with doing that with a lot of women that don't necessarily go any further. That's just kind of like playfulness. One time sucking someone's boob for 15 minutes, which I thought was incredible. Like, that is a feat in itself. Yeah, so she kind of logs everything very particularly, but then also I don't think we should take that as like all there is, because I think there is an inconsistency with what she deems worthy of logging, and other times she'll just say, I had a kiss, or a very good kiss. And I think that's the funniest, when she has sex with Mariana, who's like her favorite and she has the best sex with. She tends to just keep it very basic and will just be like, had very good sex. And it's always like the mediocre or the bad sex or the kind of agitated or nervous sex that you get like the ins and outs of how far she's gone.
And you, Anna, wrote a paper about Anne masturbating and about how she records that in her diary. And what I thought was really interesting about that was that she seems to experience a lot of shame around it, which doesn't seem like the Anne we know, the confident, brash Anne. What was the shame that she felt around this?
It was mainly religious. It's kind of, at the time, it was seen as like a secret sin. And a lot of literature was done, well, there was a couple of books that were released earlier, like 1700s, that one was like anonymous and one was written by Tissot, who was actually a really acclaimed medical writer at the time, and his copy like was basically a bestseller across America, England, and Europe, and that was all on the evils of masturbation. And so I think that just shows that culturally it was appreciated as something that was both shameful within a religious context, but also just socially and culturally shameful, and something that was embarrassing that you didn't want to own up to. And I think that comes across a lot. So a lot of the shame talk usually is about religion. So she'll ask for forgiveness and be like, oh, I prayed and it didn't work. But then other times it's related to a sense of productivity and like industriousness and like trying to study and be a better woman and like improve herself and always give time to improving herself. And so when she lies, and it's usually she lays in the morning in bed, or she reads something that's a bit raunchy, like some Greek text or literature, and she just gets carried away. And then she's like, I'm studying, and now look. She gets a bit upset with herself.
I can relate to that, you know.
I bet you can.
Katherine, I'm going to ask you a question that it's quite a difficult one to answer, but I think you're the person to do it. In your opinion, was Analysta a sexual predator?
I would say that there are echoes of that are undeniable, but I would not say no in my understanding of the predators that are well known in the world. No, she was making it up as she went along. And some of it went over the line. And that time she describes grabbing Tib by her queer. I mean, when Donald Trump said he grabs women by the pussy, I was like, that fucking jerk, I hate him. Now I read Anne Lister do, and I'm like, oh, wait, why would a woman do that to another woman? So I don't know that I can be fully comfortable saying she was totally not, but I don't think we have to decide whether she was or not. I don't think we have to label it. There was no roadmap for her, and maybe in her mind, behaving in a softly gentlemanlike way did include basically touching women and stopping only when there was verbal protest. You know, she makes it clear that she'll just keep going with that hand until she hears with her ears some sort of objection, and I'm not, it makes me uncomfortable, but no, I don't. I would say no. I would not assign that label to her.
Mm. What about you, Anna? What do you think? Analysta, would she survive the Me Too movement?
I mean, no. I mean, she's not of this time, and I think that's the mistake a lot of people make. I don't know. I think she's troubling, and I don't think it's good to avoid when she is troubling, because, like Katherine said, she does overstep some boundaries, and there are times where she does keep going when there's been a no. But I also think that the level, like the way that consent was perceived by both parties at the time was not how it is perceived now either. So I think it's a really difficult thing to write about. And like when I've been trying to do the Miss Valence storyline, it's kind of like every time I come to it, I notice something different, and I keep chip-chopping between how bad I think her behavior is. So sometimes I'm like, oh my God, no, this Miss Valence, like she knows what she wants and she's going for it. And she's asking for what she wants. And she's being like, I want to be hunted. You need to pursue me. And she's creating those role-playing, that role-playing game. And Anne is actually quite insecure about it. But then other times I notice things and I'm like, ooh, you know, Anne is pushing the boundary here, or she's like maybe creating a level of mistrust, or, you know, like you were saying, Katherine, like she's kind of using confessions or intimate, vulnerable, like stories from Miss Valence's past, and she's using that to create like this sense of, oh, I'm the one you need. But I just don't think it's straightforward, and I think almost with Anne, every day it's different. So sometimes she thinks she is the one, and sometimes maybe she isn't, she's pushing it too far. And then other days I think she's out of her depth, and Miss Valence is like making her freak out.
And I know, Katherine, that you're interested in Miss Valence and what happens between Anne and Miss Valence as well. What's your opinion on that relationship?
Well, I don't know that it was an actual relationship. You know, we don't tend to count it. You know, there's Mariana, there's Mrs. Barlow, there's Anne Walker. Mary Valence tends to get overlooked, like somewhere between Eliza, Tib, Mariana. She was in there. Anne pursued her very deliberately after finding out that she was essentially a heartbroken, unattached young lady staying with the Norcliffe family. I mean, she made a perfect target. She was there with people who weren't her real protectors. And Anne, because she was a woman, allowed into those most intimate of female spaces, both metaphorically and literally. You know, she got to share a bed, but she also was allowed to talk with her. You know, tell me the story of your broken heart. She could behave in those ways. And she says she behaves in a gentlemanlike way, but that's not a gentlemanlike way. Men don't inquire like that as a rule. You know, let's really talk about feelings here, and I want to hear all about that. I think this was her way of getting the people to, well, at least Mary Valence in this case, to get, sort of put herself in a compromised position, having revealed that she had gone the distance with her fiance or whatever. But I think Anne's seduction of Mary Valence was especially interesting because it was so calculating. It clearly was calculated just to get Mary Valence seduced, and then to keep her available, even though Anne had no intention of following up on that, just knowing she was theoretically available. And she kept asking Mary hypothetical questions like, if you came to Shibden, would you, do this? Or if I was with someone else, would you come and visit me? And she never had any intention of even inviting her. So that whole experience, that relationship, it makes me especially uncomfortable, because Mary Valence tried so hard to understand what the hell was happening. She kept trying to put this into some sort of a context. And it's just painful to almost see her vicariously through Anne's words, struggling to understand what's happening. And what was happening is, she was being seduced by someone who was doing so in a fairly calculated way, I think.
It's probably not Anne's finest hour, that one. No. But one thing that I'm interested, Anna, that you pointed out when we spoke a few weeks ago, was that not all the sex that Anne has is good sex. In fact, some of it is just bad sex. And obviously, we all have bad days from time to time. But I wonder if you could speak a little bit around what are the motivations for Anne to sleep with some of the people? Because there are times, I'm thinking of her relationship with Tibbs, where she almost seems that she doesn't want to have sex with them, but she does anyway. Why is she doing that?
I think the relationship with Tibbet I find really interesting because she's had it for such a long time. So it's one of her most long-term relationships. And it's like they seem to be best pals. Like they seem to be a kind of typical two lesbians who kind of know they're both lesbians, and they can sometimes really have a good laugh. Like there's lots of instances where it's them staying up late at night having a laugh where everyone else has gone to bed, and they're like, they can be very raucous, but then also because they're so intimate, they have lots of conversations about each other's families. They have arguments about each other's families. Tib also has a drinking problem, and a lot of her relatives, like when Analysta goes to stay with Tib at the Norcliffes, she is asked by them to like intervene because Tib won't listen to anyone else. And so she has like awkward conversations with Tib about her drinking and how bad it makes her. Also, Tib's very angry and can like fly off the handle. Basically, she's quite like a big character, and I think Analysta mainly finds that difficult because she exerts so much effort to stay restrained. And I don't think it's necessary that Analysta doesn't have a lot of passion. It's just that it's almost like she manages to control it, and I think gets hurt and annoyed if Tib can't restrain herself when she like gets angry. But they have sex whenever Tib visits or whenever Analysta visits her. They can have good sex, and she'll just say we had good sex, sometimes very good sex. And then other times, especially in my period, it just starts to get worse and worse. And Analysta describes Tib as being like a log. So that she lies like a log, or she's like
not good.
She just finds it like a lot of effort. She'll be like the labors, it was very laborious. And there's also like one entry where she's basically like both of them didn't really seem into it, but they did it anyway. And I think she does it because she feels she has to. And I couldn't say necessarily why that's so. I think with Tib, there's a financial and there's a social interest for Analysta in keeping her on her good side. And I think because Tib is invested more in their relationship in the sense of she's always been more consistent romantically, like she wants to end up with Analysta if she could. I think Analysta she constantly feels that she has to soften the blow and like tiptoe around that issue. Although they kind of have a breakup near the end of 1821, I think, where she does tell Tib that she doesn't want to end up with her because they don't suit each other. But I think Tib always knew, like Tib's not stupid. Tib is very much like an Analysta that we don't have the journal for. And she's getting up to a lot of her own stuff. And there's, she's also slept with Miss Valence, and there's like, yeah, and I kind of like that they have that camaraderie. I see it as quite a nice relationship, even though it's fraught with those kind of tensions of dependence or, like not quite knowing where boundaries are. But so I think the sex is maybe doing a bit more than just being sex. It's kind of, it's a part of a whole social like matrix.
Katherine, what do you think of Anne's relationship with Tibbs?
Well, at first sight, I was uncomfortable with that distance that Anne feels, that she invites her to where she lives, and then spends the whole time going, oh my God, I can't stand her. She won't let me read. She keeps coming up here. And I'm like, why do you keep inviting her then? And then I realized, well, for Anne, there was something to be gained in maintaining her connection to that family. And so once again, it's a sort of calculating way that she has that makes me, just a little uncomfortable. But in the end, they are just like the Bickersons, that's some made up thing here in America, what you call married people who constantly argue, but can't seem to not, they stay together. You're like, they seem not very well suited. She does make that point, and yet they are sort of tied to each other, connected in a way that Anne seems to value, except for when Tibb's actually there. And she's cruel in the language that she uses, talking about her weight gain, talking about her drinking. I'm like, if you don't like the chick, stop inviting her over for your sleepovers. But it's much more complicated than that. We can sit here now and say that, but there was, as Anna said, there was a very socially complex relationship between their families, basically. I feel sorry for Tib, and I actually think I wish she had kept a diary, and so we could have dueling diaries, and so she could, because she seems like a cool person. Like, I probably would have really liked her when I was in college or something.
It'd be fascinating to know what she thought of Anne, wouldn't it? Like to have that side of it. Anna, one of the things that you spoke to me about was Anne's sexual health. And I wondered if you wanted to speak a little bit about that, because these are parts of the diaries that I'm not very familiar with, but talk to me about her sexual health.
Well, unfortunately, Mariana gave her an STI in August 1820. Was it that? Or 1821? But yeah, she gets an STI, and then she gets obsessed with logging the details of it.
Do we know what it was?
I read it there is like a journal article where someone suggests what it is, because the strange thing about it is obviously it's been half between women, and it's got particular symptoms that I think is almost like an outdated STI. It's something I remember like reading what it was and being like, I've never heard of that. But even then, it's obviously just a hypothesis. I don't think anyone really knows what it was. But yeah, so she has a lot of different discharge for that. And then she ends up pretending that she has a friend that has this because they've got an unfaithful husband, which is what they believed. They believe Mariana got it from Charles, who got it from one of his mistresses. And so she gets like help to like a prescription. So she creates something with like alum lotion and water, and she makes pints of the stuff. At one point she makes 11 pints of it, and she has like a syringe. So she has ivory syringes, and then she gets her sister to send her a steel syringe that was used. So it must have been something. It's like the fact that she could ask her sister to send this syringe means that I think there was it wasn't like that unusual. And also you just ask a sister for it. So there's not quite the level of shame or kind of hiddenness with that kind of thing that we might expect. It's just like, oh yeah, could you give me that syringe? And then she sends it in the post. And then she has to use it right up the vagina, and she does like squirts morning and evening.
Douching, right?
Yeah, basically douching with it, like a diluted alum solution. I don't quite know what alum is, but I'll have to find out when I write that section. But she does that, and then that makes her try out whether she does like penetration, because she's like, I've never done this before. Like, I've never had anything up there, and I don't like it at all. And then she's like, tried a finger, could get no pleasure from it. It's just not my vibe. It's all about the outside. And then she has a wank. So yeah, and she has an STI on and off for the rest of her life. And what doesn't help is back then they used to use mercury in all sorts of medicine. And so she starts using mercury near the end of my diary, or a bit later, and she uses that on and off. And so she's kind of basically got mild mercury poisoning and an STI and probably many other ailments, including like she has a boil on her butt at some point. She has all sorts of shit, and then she has to deal with that. But the STI is quite interesting because she's very thorough with her descriptions, very medical about it, very kind of, she likes to think of herself as a bit of a doctor. And then she also helps Mariana quite a bit with advice. And unfortunately, Mariana seems to clear up a lot nicer than Anne's. Like Anne seems to have worse symptoms.
Oh, that's not fair. No. I can tell you that alum it's an aluminium salt, and it's been used for hundreds of years with this belief that it tightened the vagina. It was used to restore virginity, and you can still buy it online to do that. It doesn't do that, but it's supposed to tighten the skin. I don't know why she would use it for that. But okay, so I'm going to ask Katherine one more question, and then we'll go to the audience's Q&A and see what people have to question there. And if you've got questions, please put them in the Q&A. But Katherine, in your opinion, what was Anne's type? What was her fantasy woman?
In ranking in order of importance, someone who was of her rank in society or better, someone who was sexually available, and someone who had independent funds. That's
money.
what I would say. And she never found the ideal. She met her ideal sexual companion with Mariana, but the other stuff wasn't there. And you know, Tib had the rank, but they weren't that compatible. I mean, it's just really, I think that her type really was not real. I think she kept thinking that if she waited long enough, she would find someone, but ultimately she just settled for the one who had two of the three.
Yeah. Anna, what do you think? Anne's type?
Basically someone who was quite passive, had clean nails, was not vulgar, didn't laugh in the wrong places, didn't embarrass her, was quite soft, let her take care of her when they were ill, and yeah, was loaded enough that they could live together, which I think we're all kind of looking for something similar. No.
It's not a bad list, is it? Really?
She's not like, she's just, I don't know, it's like listening to a friend talk about what they're looking for on Hinge. It's not like that far removed, I think, from how
clean nails and lots of money.
Yeah.
Right. I'm gonna go to some of the questions, and the first question is, do you think that young ladies, upper and upper middle class women of the era, were so ignorant of sexuality in general that they didn't know what she was doing? So the question is did the women that Anne seduces, did they know what she was up to, or was it all a big surprise?
I would say they did, a lot of them did know what was going on. And I'd say it's very similar to how it is now, in that some people are just more clued into certain sexual practices and others are not. And some people know when someone's flirting and others do not. And I think it's not very black and white. And I think we'll never be able to just give a kind of blanket view of who knew what. But I don't think they're all sweetness and light and innocent gals. They're all up to having fun. And I think back then they had no TV. They didn't have any electricity. There was no telephones. I think they had their fun, you know?
I agree. And it seems that there was quite a thriving subculture as well. It doesn't, it's one of the things I was really surprised about the diaries was how easily she could seduce women, and that they seemed to know what was going on.
And I think actually, I don't know that they knew if they knew what Anne was doing, but they knew what was going on within themselves. When they felt that pull, they followed it. And they may not have understood how to put their social relationship in a context that would include sexual intimacy. But I think in the actual, moves, I think they, yeah, I mean, they were following their instincts just like she was. And so, once they got turned on, it wasn't any problem to, figure out where that road was going.
It's a very good seduction technique, that one. Okay, next question. This one is from Diane, and it appears that Anne was more interested in satisfying her lovers, but reluctant to have them touch her. Do you agree? And why do you think she had this view? Good question, Diane.
Well, it's nobody has to have an opinion about it. She makes it very clear when Maria Barlow touches her, she said she was shocked and startled. And she also makes it clear that she did not allow any kind of penetration of her. So I guess, in the era I was growing up in, that someone like her was called a stone butch. Someone who would not allow, the touching of themselves. And, I don't really like to label, people. If maybe she just never met someone who made her feel comfortable with that. And maybe that was always a possibility that just remained unexplored for her as far as, I mean, she did die so young. Who knows? Maybe if she'd lived a little bit longer, she might have discovered a way to incorporate that. I don't think it was some fixed thing where she was like, no, this is what I am. I'm never going to allow that. She, like I said, she was making it up as she went along, and it was all instinct with her. And so, she would have maybe gotten there. I don't know, but she definitely did not allow anyone. I don't remember if anyone. Maybe you all could correct me, but I don't think she ever allowed anyone to really get in there.
Yeah, she doesn't speak of it. She talks about, I think she just used to be a tribade, like tribade. She complains about certain people wriggling or being too far away and not close enough. And so I get the feeling that for her to orgasm during sex, she probably they had to be close, like they had to be rubbing somewhere. And the only other thing that I still am not sure of is whether they go down on her or not, whether they give her oral sex. It's not clear because she doesn't even necessarily, she's not clear about whether she's doing that to them either. So it's like, we don't know exactly what's going on, and we don't know how much she is being touched. I think she doesn't find it very interesting to log. But I do agree that she doesn't seem to like being handled as if she were the woman figure. Like, she doesn't like being penetrated, and she doesn't like that kind of activity. But yeah, she does get frustrated if they wriggle too much, and she can't get her pleasure.
It's interesting, isn't it? It sounds like it was a control thing for her as well. Maybe. All right, next question. This is a good question. I wonder, did the women around her talk about Anne and her adventures with women? Did women know who Anne was involved with, or who had been, or was it a kind of secret? So how well known was Anne Lister's adventures?
They were known to close friends, like Miss Brown. When she gets obsessed with Miss Brown, a lot of, like, the whole town picks up on it because she's not particularly she's quite obvious with it, constantly walking past their house and going on little walks and stuff. But otherwise, I think she gets talked about quite a lot in the York Society, so the circles that the Norcus and the Belcombes are in. And there's like jokes that are bandied around about, you wouldn't let Anne Lister in a room, like a room of women. like worse than a cad or whatever. So I think people know people talk a lot about her favorites. So in the town with like friends that she has there, they'll talk about her having a favorite. So yeah, I think it was one of those weird things where it was said and not said. Like no one would be like, oh, she's definitely, like no one would directly just come out and be like, oh, she's having sex with that person or she wants to. It was just that she had favorites, or you've got to be a bit cautious around this one because she's a bit of an oddball.
Yeah, I don't think the people who became sexually compromised with Anne talked freely to other people about that experience. I don't get that impression, and that's part of how Anne maintains that power over them, that it's just all between her and them. It's not, I'm not talking about people gossiping about her. I'm talking about the people she actually seduced. I think it became a secret between them that she never spoke of to anyone, and they probably never spoke of to anyone either, because it would indicate something about themselves that they probably wouldn't want. So
interesting, isn't it? Just how much what was her reputation? Did people know? And okay, next question. This is from Claire Collins, you scallywag. Here we go. Do you think that she was a top or a bottom? I think she's a power bottom, especially with Maria Barlow. Thanks, Claire.
I was reading the comments at one point and someone called her a service top. And I thought that was like
service top.
Like relatively spot on. Because she does get she gets agitated if she knows she's not giving them enough pleasure. Like she doesn't like the idea that she's not being successful in that way. So yeah, there's like a little bit of servicing going on. Like she wants to make sure she does it well. But she also obviously wants them to not wriggle about and fly all over the place. So yeah, I don't know. But yeah, what do you think, Catherine?
I think Anne would have been capable of all of it. I just think that what she writes about that she does, she mostly is a controlling person. She has to be in control in all aspects of her life. And so in that sense, I'm not really comfortable with labels like that. I don't tend to like to use them, but I would say that she always had to be in control, and that any position, literal or metaphorical, where she wasn't in control she would have stayed away from.
Good answers. Well done. Okay. Oh, there's a question for you, Anna. Is the wank paper publicly available? Can it be accessed publicly?
It can't at the moment, but I will be like expanding the wank paper in my thesis, and then my thesis will be open access. So all of it will be available at some point.
Okay. Thoughts on Analysta's proportionately lower numbers of entry noting oral sex versus other modalities, which is a very delicate way of saying, I like that, modalities. Would you come over and you can modality me? Very delicate. I like it. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So I guess what is she getting up to in the sack? Is it that she's not writing about oral sex that much? Is there different? Is it all fingering? Is it what's Anne doing?
There's a lot of grumbling. A lot.
That word, is it grubbling or grumbling that she uses?
Grumbling. Lovely, charming word.
It sounds so dirty, doesn't it? Grubbling. And what is that? What is grubbling?
That's just like rubbing somebody with your hand. But yeah, she does it. The oral sex she barely mentions, and I do find it really interesting because she does, like Katherine mentioned, she does like look with a candle. She does like to look at people's queers sometimes. So there's like an eroticism and like a closeness to their queers, but she doesn't necessarily talk about kissing it. But then I think because she uses the word kiss for everything, like it's hard to know what precisely is meant by that in certain contexts. And sometimes I'm like, oh, does she actually mean like she actually kissed it, or does she mean that she just gave someone an orgasm, or does she mean that, oh, they just had sex then, and like sex to her is like, I don't even know what it is. It's kind of
Grubbling.
it's inconsistent.
Catherine, what do you think grubbling is?
I would agree with Anna. It's just working with the hand. She does do that thing with the candle, but that seems to be more of a power thing, like that she can get a visual on that. She is clearly, a woman who is visually stimulated. She actually finds that to be something that she wants to do. But I think when she speaks of grubbling, I think that's just a hand motion, whatever that the extent of that is. It is hard because she does use that word kiss, and I do think at some point, I can't remember who it was about, because I mean, my God, it's just so many. Reading about so many times, she did say that she said, I kissed the top of her queer. So I don't know, somehow right at the pubic bone. I don't know if that's what she means. It is hard to know, but at the same time, as explicit as she is, it's funny that we're asking these questions, because she's more explicit than anyone I've ever heard of, and yet we still aren't quite sure what was going on.
What it is.
Covers. Yeah.
In the chat, Amanda has put, isn't grubbling a farming term akin to ploughing? I've no idea, but I hope so. I love that. I hope that's right, Amanda. I really do. Okay. This is a good question. This is from Leah. I'm curious about the practice of exchanging locks of pubic hair, which I know Analysta did with a number of her lovers. What did she do with it? I've heard she kept it in a locket. So what did she do with it when she started pursuing someone else? So the practice of cutting and exchanging pubic hair with your lovers.
There is a funny, like, it's not funny, but it kind of
is though.
There's this moment where she tries to take Miss Valance's pubic hair, but like without telling her, and she just gets scissors and like tries to get it up the dress, and Miss Valance is like,
right, yeah.
Off. What the hell? No, you're not allowed any. She's like, damn it. I was like, wow, like desperate.
Anna, really?
Weird behavior sometimes. But yeah, no, she does like to have some pubic hair.
Scalping people
with stuff after, because she doesn't. Again, it's like, considering how much detail she gives about her life and about her things and her material possessions, I don't know how, like, whether she keeps things. I get the sense that she's quite sentimental, and that it's very likely she would have kept things in her writing drawer or in some kind of box. But in my section, she doesn't talk about where they go, like once she, or even like whether she hides them. Like, say if she gets Miss Valance's, where does she hide it from Mariana, and like how does she make sure that if Mariana stays, she doesn't discover someone else's pubic hair in the locket?
And how does she know whose hair is whose?
Maybe they just like, yeah, whose hair is whose. I guess all different colors, maybe.
I'm being a grown-up historian. I'm sorry. Right. So.
Well, and I think it was very important for Anne to have these tangible artifacts of her seductions, of her sexual success, because she didn't have pictures.
Trophies.
She didn't have any other, I mean, it was maybe words, letters she might have received professing love, but these locks of pubic hair were tangible symbols of her conquest, and that she could relive them through, like she could take them out and, I don't know, pet them or whatever. I don't know. This is behavior that is a little outside of my actual experience. And that business about, kind of diving under the sheets with the scissors, I'm like, what the fuck are you thinking? I mean, it's just, oh.
Bad, Anne, bad.
It does seem to be like pubic hair, the exchange of pubic hair does seem to be a thing back then. Like Miss Valance, I think, also talks about her original, like the man she lost her virginity to. I think he already took some of her pubic hair. So I think it does seem to be an intimate exchange amongst lovers.
Apparently, lots of women sent Byron their pubic hair and asked for his in return. And I read somewhere that he cut fur off of his dog and sent it to them. I mean, you've only got so much to go round, haven't you? Right, okay. Next, we've got 6 minutes. So we'll get through as many of these as we can. From Patricia, Eliza. We haven't spoken about Eliza. Eliza had money. She had looks. She was smart. What happened with her and Anne? Why didn't Eliza stay the course?
I actually don't know. I haven't studied their breakup, so the only thing
very young.
I would like speculate would be that they were young. They lived far apart. At the time when they met, I don't know if Eliza didn't have her own fortune yet. It wasn't practical. And I think it was only once they were teenagers that there was the whole issue of Eliza getting the money. But then by then, I think her sister had done something ridiculous. Like she got pregnant before matrimony, or something had gone wrong, and like it was all quite fraught. So basically, I think it wasn't like. I think a lot of the reasons that she doesn't end up with somebody is because it was not straightforward, and there's been something that means it's just not practical.
I mean, and who do we know that is still with the person they first had sex with when they were 16? You know, that is everybody always moves on. And so like when 16-year-olds say, oh, you know, we're madly in love and it's going to last forever, we all roll our eyes and be like, yeah, right. We'll see about that. But, you know, it's really not why. It would have been amazing for Anne to be with the same person all that. She just, because they weren't physically proximate, and you know she did have that compulsion, and she actually was behaving in a seductive way towards Miss Alexander while Eliza was in the room. So even while she was with Eliza, she was actively pursuing, in a low-level way, she was pursuing someone else, at least to get that woman compromised and available. You know, she was having Miss Alexander sit on her knee. I think she was giving her piano lessons or something.
At least she wasn't chasing her with the scissors, I suppose.
Analysta was never going to be faithful to Eliza. Eliza was living in a fantasy world if she thought that this was going to be some big, you know, forever and ever thing. That was never going to, I don't think, that's just how I read it. I could be way off, but.
No, I think that makes sense. They're very young, and I don't think she had enough money for Anne. All right, another question. Here we go. This one is from Isabel. Did she eventually allow Anne Walker to get intimate with her and touch her? Do we know, was that ever recorded in the journals that Anne Walker was allowed to touch her?
It's outside of my period, but I would venture to say no. I think there was a relative consistency in that regard. And I think with Anne Walker particularly, Anne Walker was kind of the passive recipient. She kind of, the whole point was that she did play the role quite well. And that's why, you know, the combined fortune as well, but like the fact that she could play that role and she was quite passive and womanly and just adhered to Anne's, well, actually they argued loads, but like she tried and she seemed, so I would say, yeah, sexually, I don't think she would have let her touch her in that way.
Yeah, I don't remember any instance of that. I mean, she comments on it when Maria Barlow touches her. It's not that, you know, I mean, she had, not that the diaries record every single thing. Oh, wait, yes, they do. So I don't think that Anne Walker had that role with her. I think by that time, Anne Lister was not really open to that. I mean, if she wasn't open to it with earlier people who were not quite so passive as Anna says, and Anne Walker was just not the type who was going to conquer that mountain.
And also, if you want to know more about Anne Walker, I think Emma Donoghue is doing a book on oh no, shit, no, she's doing 11 Reign, isn't she? I don't know. There is research on Anne Walker, and there's Anne Walker's diary. So if you're interested, you can access Anne Walker's diaries.
We do have a fabulous comment here from Analysta researcher who notes that Anne Walker did complain a couple of times that Lister did not give her enough dinky, which I've never heard that word before. So thank you everyone for that. But apparently dinky is like vaginal moisture, what the French would call supreme. meaning cypress, or what we would call in the UK fanny batter, which is horrible.
And Americans don't even have a word for it.
No, there's no words for it. It's all like, how many words for semen can you think of?
Yeah.
And what do we say? Like vaginal mucus. Oh, sexy. I quite like dinky.
Yeah.
I think. Thanks. I've never heard that before. Is that in Anne Walker's diaries, or is it in?
Yeah, it'll be in
Analysta
Anne Walker's diaries.
No, I didn't
Wow.
notice. Yeah.
Never. And on that absolute bombshell, everybody, we have got through all of the questions, and they were fabulous, and the comments were fabulous. And thank you so much to Katherine Pennavaria and Anna Hawthorne for joining me today to talk about the Lister moves. Thank you very much, everybody.
It was a blast. It was a blast. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.